Welcome back. In this lesson, we'll be learning all about the vocabulary that you must use in IELTS Writing Task 1. I believe that even if your level of English is very advanced, there's still a lot of IELTS specific vocabulary that you need to learn and practice using. Here are your lesson know-its. By the end of this video, you will know some of the essential IELTS Writing Task 1 vocabulary. You'll also be able to use some advanced language to describe a bar chart, map, or process. If at any point during this lesson you have some questions, please go to the Q&A section and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I can. Let's go back to the band descriptors to understand why vocabulary is so important for your final band score. You may remember the band descriptors are split into 4 sections. That's task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource and grammatical range and accuracy. The key point to remember is these 4 criteria are marked equally at 25% each. So your use of vocabulary or lexical resource makes up 1/4 or 25% of your final band score. A band 6 in lexical resource means that you haven't used too much advanced vocabulary. You may have used it inaccurately with some mistakes, or you could have repeated yourself too often. To achieve a band 7 in lexical resource, you must use a range of advanced vocabulary with little repetition and fewer mistakes. For a top band 8 or band 9 score, you must use sophisticated language with very little repetition, and there also needs to be few or actually 0 mistakes in your writing and vocabulary. Here are some quick tips to follow to score highly in lexical resource. My first top tip is to try and not repeat your language too often. Also, don't copy the language from the question. Use synonyms to paraphrase. Next, I would suggest trying to use some less common vocabulary. And finally, make sure you're using your vocabulary accurately and you're spelling it correctly. Also, I would suggest writing down and taking notes of any vocabulary in this lesson that you think you will find useful. Let's get on with the lesson. To increase your range of vocabulary, it's really important that you have a good understanding of synonyms. Now, synonyms are words that have a very similar or the exact same meaning. And throughout this lesson, I'll be teaching you lots of IELTS writing specific vocabulary and synonyms. Here is a quick example of 3 synonyms for the word profit. By having a larger range of vocabulary, you will find it easier to not repeat yourself. Here is the essential vocabulary for your introduction paragraph. Note them down and practice using them in a variety of ways. You could also post them to the Q&A section. Here are 4 top openers that you could use to begin your writing. The given, the preceding, the supplied, the shown. Following this, we need to give the type of visual information that we are provided with. Then add one of these verbs and this is your opening sentence. Now let's take a look at a few examples using this table. The supplied bar chart describes. The given line graphs compare. Have a go at writing your own opening introduction. Now we'll move on to vocabulary all about graphs and charts. Here are 5 common trends that you will see with graphs and charts. And we have both gradual and rapid changes. As well, we also have a plateau, or we could say that it is stabilized. Here are your synonyms for increase and decrease. I've highlighted the vocabulary rocketed and plunged in blue because you would only use these two words to describe a big, quick change. We use adverbs to show how quickly the change happened. For gradual, you could use these adverbs. Let's see a few examples. The line graph slightly increased. Or you could also say, the graph moderately grew. Both these sentences mean there was a small increase. Here are some examples to describe a small decrease. The graph slowly decreased. The graph moderately fell. Pause the video and write your own versions describing gradual changes in the line graph. Let's move on to rapid, big changes. Here are your adverbs and here are some example sentences. The line graph sharply climbed. And here's an example with rocketed, which does not need an adverb. The graph rocketed. Let's see examples for a very large decrease. You could write the line graph sharply declined, or you could also say the graph plunged. We've covered quite a few different ways in which you can use synonyms to discuss trends in graphs and charts. Before moving on, I suggest writing notes about the information that you can see before you now. Do that and then move on to the next section of this lesson. Now we'll move on to the essential vocabulary that you need to describe maps. Some of the most important vocabulary that you need when describing maps is being able to talk about location. If you look to the top middle of the screen, you can see an 8-point compass. I'll show you how we can describe some location using the compass. Here is a wind turbine, which is used to produce electricity. And here is the car park. I would describe the car park as being southeast of the wind turbine. Or I could say the wind turbine is located to the northwest of the car park. Here are some synonyms that you could use instead of located. You could use situated or found. For example, the secret garden is situated to the east of the vegetable patch. Or the play area is found to the north of the primary building. Use the example sentences and the 8-point compass to practice describing the location of features on this map. As well as location, we also need to be able to describe how maps have changed. So let's look at some vocabulary for that. When you are presented with two maps from the same location but different times, you must be able to report what has been removed and what has been developed. If something has been built, you could use these synonyms to describe that. Developed, added, built, constructed, or transformed. For example, from this map, you could say that the shops were developed into more residential housing. If a building or place has been reused instead of completely destroyed and rebuilt, you can use developed or transformed. If this place is completely new, you would say it was added, built, or constructed. If something disappears, we can use replaced, removed, or demolished. For example, the farmland was demolished. That's all for the essential vocabulary about maps. We're going to move on to learn what language you must know to report processes and diagrams. When reporting a process, we must describe each stage from beginning to finish. So, it's very important that we use time connectives to order our language and report logically. Here are some examples of what time connectives you can use. This table gives you some ideas on language you can use to time order your report. You will only need to use one of the phrases from the first and final stages, but as there may be a few stages in the whole process, you might need to use a lot of the phrases in the middle stage column. Here are some examples using the time connectives to describe the life cycle of a frog. In the beginning, eggs are laid by an adult frog in the river. After that, an embryo develops inside the egg. Finally, the tadpole frog loses its tail and becomes an adult frog. That's all for our lesson on essential vocabulary for IELTS Writing Task 1. It's really important that you try and practice using a range of vocabulary. If you've got any questions, use the Q&A feature or drop me a message. See you soon.